All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming. In the last video, as you can see there on your screen, I started to give an introduction to Entity Framework, also known as EF. And I want to continue on with that a little bit and then start to show you how we're going to incorporate that into the project I'm working on. Okay? First thing to realize, I gave you that one before, this thing. And when I tried to run this command, install package Microsoft Entity Framework Core, when I tried to do that, I got this error message. All right, and if you look at it, the reason I got the error message is it says it could not install Entity Framework Core 10.0.1 right there. All right. And what I'm going to have to do to try to get this to work, we'll see, is to install an earlier version of this, much earlier. Either that or I'd have to upgrade what I'm working on here. And you might say, well, then why don't you do that? Well, again, I'm doing this right now. I'm going to go into Entity Framework. When I get done with this, I plan on going into the payroll program that we've done and try to update that with Entity Framework as well. Then after that, I'd like to take both those applications, both the BMI application with Entity Framework and the payroll application with Entity Framework, and convert both of them into ASP.NET packages where they'll basically run, do the equivalent of run on a website. And once I do that, I'm done. All right, and that's just a couple things. That's quite a bit to do yet, but I don't really want to sit there and keep adding new stuff, moving stuff around, etc. So this is what I'm going to do. All right, the other thing I wanted to mention to you, again, that won't work, but I found another couple sites in here that I thought were pretty good, and I want to go over them a little bit. The first one here is from, I'd never heard this before, but it's right here, steve-bang.com/blog/entity-framework-core-basic-for-beginners. And as you can see, that's what it says. And I'm going to go over some of the stuff that's in here. It's a fairly extensive article, so I'm not going to go over it, in every bit of it. All right. Now, we've already talked about what EF is. It may or may not make a lot of sense to you right now, but in a nutshell, rather than having to write what is actually referred to as ADO, ActiveX Data Objects.NET, which is what we did in our last program. All right, we're able to handle database tables more or less like they're classes, and that's what Entity Framework allows you to do. Now, what does that mean? Why should you even care? Well, a lot of people are experts in C# or they're experts in databases, but probably a lot fewer are experts in both. So if you're an expert in C# and you really don't want to work that much in databases, or if you want to have a lot of the code written for you, Entity Framework Core is a really good way to do that. As it says, this in-depth guide was written for beginners with practical examples and explanations. All right. Now, what is Entity Framework Core? What does it do? All right. Again, what I just mentioned, maps .NET classes to database tables. That's what this object relational mapping is. Once we do that, we'd like to be able to query the database. All right. You saw a couple queries in the last example, but really when you think about it, the only things we put in there, we put an insert query in, we put a select statement in, all right, and a delete statement. But there's a lot more to writing queries than that. All right, so we'll talk about link and what link is. As it says, if your database schema changes, you can do what's called migrate the database. All right, run a migration against it. The benefits, we've talked about these before. I'm not going to sit and read to you. All right. So we already have a new project. Okay, we are going to, in just a minute, we're going to attempt to add some of these packages. All right, now in order to add some of these packages, there's different ways that you can do it. But we're going to try to do it, see if we can do it, using what is referred to as the NuGet Package Manager. What the heck is that? Well, all right. It says there, an essential tool for modern development is a mechanism through which you can create, share, and consume useful code. Some of that code is going to be written for you, bundled into packages that contain compiled code as DLLs, dynamic link library files. For .NET, as it says, the Microsoft-supported mechanism for sharing code is NuGet. It's a package manager. As it says here, simply, it's a single zip file that contains compiled code, other files related to that code, and a manifest. So it has a bunch of pre-written stuff for you that you can use. In fact, what they say in here on the bottom here is, in short, a NuGet package is a shareable unit of code, but it does not require nor imply means of sharing. All right, so we're going to end up working with the NuGet Package Manager. All right, so there's different ways that you can add that. We're going to add this to the NuGet Package Manager. We're going to do something similar to all three of these. Now, if you notice, what are we going to be adding? The first is EF Core, the Entity Framework Core. Then we're going to add the core.SQL Server. All right, so that's just the SQL Server part. Then we're going to add the EF Core.Tools. So are some of the tools we want to be able to use. We're going to be doing this because we're not using SQLite, we're not using Postgres. We've already got a connection string. I don't think we're going to have to modify that, and if we do, the modifications, hopefully at least, are going to be minor. Now, here's where it starts to get a little bit hinky, for lack of better words. All right? And what I mean by that is we're going to come in here and we're going to create, when you think about this, all right, I'm going to grab this. And let's just come over here and put this in. Now, what are we going to do? Well, we've got a BMI table, right? So let's just say we called it BMI table. All right. We'll have an int ID. What did we call that before? You can call that person ID. You can change the name. You don't have to use the names that are shown here. All right. Then we're going to have a string first name. We're going to have a string last name. We're going to have an int for height. We're going to have an int for weight. We're going to have a double. I don't know if it'll be a double or a float. Probably a float. I don't remember. For BMI. We're going to have another string for BMI status. We will have this created at type of thing. I don't remember what we called it. I think we called it date created. I don't remember. And then we're going to say in here equals date dot, I think it's like get now or something like that. So we're going to do something like this. This may not be exactly what we're doing, but this is the idea. So we're going to replace the table that we created with a C# class that's going to end up doing virtually the same thing for us. So again, why do we want to do this? you hopefully saw, in fact, let me bring this up. Our SQL person repository. I was going to bring that file up for a second. If you remember some of the stuff that we had to do in here. All right. So for instance, we had that select statement when we wanted to order everything. And then when we wanted to add it, look what we had to do. It was kind of a pain in the butt to have to do all that stuff. And it was as bad, if not worse, when we came in to do the insert. This is almost straight SQL here, almost, but then we had to do this too. So we're going to be able to, again, many people who are C# programmers are not database people per se. They don't have a lot of experience in databases. So what we're going to be able to do is a lot of this code, we're going to be able to basically have it written for us. Now, we're only going to have one table in here, just the one class. So they have a couple of them here, and it's no biggie. But we have to also create something like this. This is going to be called a DB context file. Ours will be something like BMI context. All right, notice using what we added there. All right, it is going to take from that entity framework core, it's going to inherit from DB context. Now we'll have something, but again, ours won't be public, DB set, post, etc. That's the two that you had here. All right, ours will be for the BMI. And then we'll have to do this too. All right, so what does this do? Take a look at this. The DB context manages the objects during runtime. All right. The database provider, we're going to use something that's going to look like this. We've already got most of that in there in our app.config file, but we'll have to add that in here as well. You'll notice it's in here. So server equals local DB, our local machine. So this would have to be changed if we were running this on an actual server someplace rather than our own machine. It's in Microsoft SQL, local DB. The database will be the name of our database, and the trusted connection will be true. This will be the only one we care about. We don't care about the SQLite or the Postgres. All right. Now look at this. Migrations let you evolve your database schema over time. What does that mean? That means that as time goes on, you may decide that you need to add a field to your database or fields, or remove a field from the database. All right? So when you first create this, you'll create an initial migration. As it says, it'll generate code to create the schema based on the models. And then you apply the migration, and then every time you need to, you're able to update this. Okay? This is going to allow us, as it says here, to run some CRUD operations. CRUD, as I mentioned before, it's an acronym that stands for create, which is like inserting data into a table, read, which is like a select statement, update, which we didn't have before, which allows you to change existing data, and delete, which allows you to delete records. All right. When you start to look at this stuff now, don't look at this so much, but take a look at this. This is where we start to bring in something that is very linkish, LINQ, line item query. All right. So what are we saying here? Well, from the post table, where the created at days, all right, was 7 days ago. So show us everything that is greater than 7 days ago. So within the last week, order it in descending order, and then list it. So this is going to allow us to do reading, updating, deleting. All right, as it says there, EF Core allows you to create queries using LINQ. LINQ is also compile time. So in other words, it's compile time check. So if you've got any errors in the way you're writing something, it's going to let you know. And I'm not going to go through all this stuff right now. All right. So it says best practices when using EF Core. All right. It says always register DB context with a DI container. What that means is, with this dependency injection fact, I'm going to give you a real crummy explanation. So all right. Dependency injection is a programming technique in which an object or function receives other objects or functions that it requires, rather than creating them internally. It aims to separate the concerns constructing objects and using them, leading to loosely coupled programs. You want programs that are loosely coupled. What that means is you want to set it up so that if you change A, B is not affected. If you've got something that's tightly coupled, if you change A, you might have to change B as well. Hopefully that's going to make a little more sense as we go on. All right, at least that's my hope. All right. Says use 1 DB context per unit of work. All right, always use migrations. This is one thing that's going to be important. You're going to see this when we create our own class in just a bit. All right, it says use data annotations. There's only a couple that are in here, and that is these here. So the title is required, and the title must be 150 or less characters. Well, with ours, we're going to make every field in our BMI table required, and we've got size limitations on, I think we said the first name and the last name were 50 characters, and I think we said that the BMI status, I believe, was 20 characters or something, or 25. All right, that's about all I wanted to go through in here. But I did want to mention again, I said this a little bit earlier, but I want to say it again, and that is we're going to be using a much earlier version of EF Core. All right, I believe the one that we're going to use is 3.1, and the newest is 10.1.1. All right, last thing I want to say is I went out to learn.microsoft.com, and they have this series with about 5 or 6 videos in it. They explain what EF Core is right there, and then if you look here, all right, again, like I said, let's make this smaller here. There we go. There's 6 videos. Getting started with EF Core, that's about 16 minutes long. Working with an existing database, 6 minutes long. That's, for now, that's probably all you'd have to take a look at. All right? But it's a 6-part series that's done up by a guy from Microsoft. All right? So I'm going to come back. I don't even know where we are for time. We're about almost at 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to come back and I want to go through very, very, very slowly the changes that we're going to have to make, hopefully to get rid of this error that you saw down here, all right, and allow us to go in and start to work with NuGet Package Manager and start to create our class, and then talk about the other files that'll either have to be added or changed to the program. All right, I hope to come back tomorrow and have that for you. See you then.